Russia, which invaded Ukraine, has turned into a minefield. Explosions are constantly happening in Russia. The Russian fire brigade is not enough to put out the fires. Russia is experiencing the most difficult days in its history. There are different claims about the origin of these explosions. Let's take a closer look at the fire in Russia to analyze these explosions and their consequences. The Russian army was planning to keep this war on Ukrainian territory, but now the explosions are taking place in Russia. Nothing is going Putin's way in this war. Another fire broke out in a shopping center in Russia today. Just 3 days ago, there was a huge fire in a shopping center in Moscow. The succession of the fires has made the Russian people very worried. The roof of the story-tracked shopping center collapsed today after a fire broke out in a building in the town of Balashika, the Moscow region's emergency services said. Security measures have been raised to the highest level in all shopping centers in Russia. The cause of these fires in shopping malls is still unknown. However, it is quite surprising that these fires occur during the hours when the shopping centers are closed. No civilians were harmed in the fires, but assets belonging to important companies of the Russian economy were damaged. In addition, Russian citizens are experiencing great panic due to these attacks. There is a very serious decline in the number of people going to shopping malls in Russia. There is already a huge economic crisis in Russia. The Russian ruble continues to depreciate day by day. In Moscow, the squares are decorated for New Year's Eve, but the streets are full of closed shutters, because many Russian companies have gone bankrupt in this process. After the explosions in shopping malls in Russia, it is thought that more companies will go bankrupt in the Russian economy. Explosions in Russia have not only occurred in shopping malls. There have been explosions at 2 military bases in Russia in recent days. One of them was at a military airport. Fighter jets belonging to the Russian army were damaged in this explosion. The other explosion occurred in a fuel tanker near the military base. The fuel tanker could not be extinguished for hours. Explosions are also taking place in Russian-occupied regions. The Russian-appointed deputy governor of Ukraine's southern Kherson region was injured in a car explosion. Vitaly Bulyuk was seriously injured in this explosion. The driver of the car lost his life. Attacks against Russian-appointed bureaucrats in these regions are increasing. It is known that Russia pays 2 salaries to the bureaucrats assigned in this region. However, many bureaucrats still do not want to work in the occupied territories, because Russian bureaucrats know that the Ukrainian army will liberate these regions. No one wants to be part of a war that they will lose. The Ukrainian army is conducting extensive operations to liberate Russian-occupied territories. Another area where explosions were heard today was Melitopol. There were many Russian soldiers in this Russian-occupied region. The Ukrainian army has launched a massive offensive against these bases. The total number of Russian soldiers killed in the last 24 hours has exceeded 500. The Russian army is helpless in the face of HIMARS attacks. Russian bases in Melitopol were destroyed thanks to the HIMARS used by the Ukrainian army. HIMARS are the most important tools that change the course of this war. The HIMARS sent to Ukraine by the United States have a very destructive power. HIMARS can carry 6 missiles at the same time. They can send these missiles up to 80 kilometers away. Such a large range of HIMARS puts the Russian military in a very difficult situation. HIMARS can move very quickly and change their position after launching missiles. This is why the Russian army has a very difficult time destroying HIMARS. In all operations carried out by the Ukrainian army using HIMARS, Russia suffers heavy damages. The missiles carried by HIMARS have a high destructive power. Thanks to the incredible success of these missiles in hitting the target, the Ukrainian army gains a great advantage in these battles. However, the range of HIMARS is not sufficient for the areas in Russia where the explosions took place. Investigations are ongoing into how the fuel tanker and military aircraft exploded. Many in the Russian press claim that These explosions were caused by Ukrainian drones. Bayraktar drones used by Ukraine can overcome Russia's air defense system. Flying at a very high altitude, these drones cannot be detected by radar systems. It is estimated that these drones carry out operations in critical areas in Russia. However, Russia denies that these attacks were carried out by Ukraine. The Ukrainian army has also not claimed responsibility for the attacks. Russia is not saying anything about the origin of these attacks. It only says that the investigation is ongoing. The reason for this is quite simple. The Kremlin does not want to lose face because of the explosions in Russia. If it turns out that the Ukrainian army is conducting operations in the center of Russia, there will be a major crisis. Russia wants to hide its intelligence weakness. News about it is being blocked. But despite its best efforts, Russia is unable to maintain its reputation. With explosions every day, it is certain that Russia will lose this war. Russia was threatening the whole world by claiming to have one of the strongest armies in the world, but thanks to the historic resistance of the Ukrainian army, it turned out that the Russian army is actually quite weak. No state is afraid of Russia anymore. In addition, the balance is changing all over the world as a result of the failure of the Russian army. China, one of Russia's important allies, does not support this war. China now wants to be the new leader of Eastern countries. This leads to an escalation of the rivalry between China and Russia. For a long time, Russia, which emerged from the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, was considered the most important power in the Eastern countries. Russia's major defeat in Ukraine has changed that. The danger of Russia's collapse is growing every day. It is known that NATO members have started to prepare for a possible collapse of Russia. NATO may confiscate the nuclear weapons in Russia. This could be a turning point for the reduction of nuclear weapons. The collapse of Russia could change global balances all over the world. The historic defense of the Ukrainian army could lead to one of the most important turning points in world history. The Ukrainian army is doing everything in its power to win this war. According to experts, when the winter months are over, the Ukrainian army is expected to launch a comprehensive operation. As a result of this operation, the war may end completely. The Ukrainian army aims to liberate all of the regions occupied by Russia. Crimea, occupied by Russia in 2014, is one of these regions. The Ukrainian army managed to get closer to Crimea by liberating the Kherson region. Russia fears a large number of missile attacks on Russian bases in Crimea. Therefore, various measures have been taken. First of all, very deep pits and trenches have been dug around Crimea to prevent HIMARS from approaching Crimea. What happens in Crimea could decide the outcome of this war. If the Ukrainian army succeeds in liberating Crimea, Russia will suffer a historic defeat. This could lead to the end of Putin's political career. According to experts, Crimea will be the region where the knot of this war will be untied. The conflict in Crimea will decide the fate of Russia.